teams have officially kicked off spring workouts. That includes OTAs. We are around the corner from summer training camp as well. However, that does not mean that rosters are completely set for 2025 because moves can still happen as the post-June 1st deadline looms. So what is actually the post-June 1st deadline? Well, it means that a team can release a player on or after June 2nd, and this will help the team spread the player's remaining contract costs, that dead cap that you hear us refer to, over 2 years instead of one, helping a team with immediate savings. So take a look at this. If some of these big names like Jaire Alexander, Jalen Ramsey, Kirk Cousins are moved after June 1st, it could save their teams a lot of money. Picking on the Falcons here, they traded Cousins after June 1st. They can save $27.5 million. Actually insane to think about. So for much more ahead of tomorrow's roster deadline, let's go ahead and welcome in our own Tyler Sullivan for more. Tyler, one of the most rumored post-June 1st moves that we've been talking about for weeks could be the Falcons moving on from Kirk Cousins, either via trade or simply just releasing him. For the Falcons, it kind of makes a ton of sense, but to spin this forward, the Steelers still seem to be unclear of what Aaron Rodgers plans to do. Are the Steelers the team that should be doing their due diligence on Kirk Cousins as a potential quarterback this upcoming season?
Absolutely, Jordan. This is a team that it makes so much sense to be a landing spot for Kirk Cousins because if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to remember you're talking about OTAs. Minicamp for the Pittsburgh Steelers opens up in 10 days. And right now, Mason Rudolph is their week 1 starting quarterback. He's probably going to take those first team reps. That doesn't do you any good to prepare yourself for the regular season, to prepare yourself for training camp when you're what we hope to be, the Pittsburgh Steelers hope to be, starting quarterback and Aaron Rodgers. Not even on the roster, doesn't even feel like he's a blip on the radar right now. So if you are the Steelers and a player like Kirk Cousins, who would be a clear upgrade from what you have currently in your quarterback room, becomes available, they should absolutely pursue this. You could even make the case that Kirk Cousins is a better option than Aaron Rodgers right now, strictly when you're talking about football. Last season, Kirk Cousins had a better yards per pass attempt, passing yards per game, completion percentage, better than Aaron Rodgers. And if we're talking about buy-in from Mike Tomlin's team, I feel like Kirk Cousins would buy in. Clearly wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. This would be his last shot. Makes a lot of sense. Aaron Rodgers, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get from him on a week-in and week-out basis. Not someone that I would want to hitch my wagon to. I would feel much more comfortable if it were Kirk Cousins, if I'm Mike Tomlin and the Steelers.
Yeah, it seems that Kirk Cousins is the contingency plan here for the Steelers, but an expensive one as well. One player who is actively being shopped and expected to move is Jalen Ramsey for the Miami Dolphins. The Rams, Cowboys, Falcons were teams that reportedly were in the mix there. But where do you feel he fits best?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 teams because one, I just really like it, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The other one makes a ton of sense. The first one is the Washington Commanders. That team, to me, has loaded up all offseason. They bring in Laramie Tunsil on the offensive line. They bring in Deebo Samuel. Let's help out the defense a little bit more, especially when you're in a division where you're going up against a ton of receiver duos, whether it's George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Adding a guy like Jalen Ramsey to that secondary would push you even further to get over the hump. And again, you have your quarterback on a rookie deal in Jaden Daniels, which can allow you a little bit more flexibility. Now, the reason why I don't think that one's realistic is because the Commanders really don't have a lot of assets. They have 5 first-round picks next season, the majority of them on day 3, so I don't really see an avenue for a trade like that to go down. The team that I think makes a world of sense is the Cincinnati Bengals. That team, to me, clearly needs an upgrade defensively. Of course, the offseason storylines were that they were able to retain Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to massive extensions. But what was the reason they missed the playoffs last year? It was a poor start, poor play on the defensive side of the ball. They surrendered the 4th most passing touchdowns during the regular season a year ago. They need to really revamp this defense. We don't know the status of Trey Hendrickson, but again, if you want to fix that secondary, Jalen Ramsey could be an option.
All right, we'll see where he ends up. I do love that you brought up the Washington Commanders there, but unfortunately seems like a little bit of a pipe dream for that to come to fruition. Another player who could be on the move, Packers cornerback, I mentioned him, Jaire Alexander. He was reportedly in discussions with Green Bay to renegotiate his deal, but given his history, do you see a world where the Packers move on here?
Yeah, I don't. I think the further this goes along, the more likely it is he stays with the Green Bay Packers. There was a story this week, Xavier McKinney, part of that secondary for Green Bay, talking about how he feels like it's going to be fine. He wants him back in Green Bay. Obviously, he's got to let the situation play out, but overall hopes that he has his running mate in the secondary back. They were able to bring in Nate Hobbs in free agency, so they have pieces there if they were to lose Jaire Alexander. But if you're the Green Bay Packers and he is willing to renegotiate his deal to make it a little bit more palatable, I think it makes sense to keep him at Lambeau Field. Of course, like I said, you have McKinney, you have Nate Hobbs, so you don't necessarily need to put all your eggs in the Jaire Alexander basket, especially for a player that's played 7 games in each of the last 2 seasons. But you are now in a division where, very similar to what we were talking about with the Commanders, where there is a high-flying offense, a ton of wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams in Detroit. You have Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, DJ Moore in Chicago, of course, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in Minnesota. You need all the help you can get to compete in that division against those really just unbelievable wide receiver pairings. So to have Jaire Alexander as a part of that. Now, again, we have questions about how he can be available and his durability, but they have players in that secondary. He would be a nice cherry on top if they're able to make this contract restructure work out.
Yeah, big if there. We will wait and see where some of these big names.
We haven't seen Cowboys superstar defensive end Micah Parsons at OTA since May 19th, but that isn't surprising. He's waiting for a massive contract extension, which could make him the highest paid non-QB in the league. And with that, we bring in CBS Sports NFL writer Garrett Podell, who covers the Cowboys for us, and he's been at OTAs all week. And Garrett, this is not the first time a star Cowboys player has not been present at OTAs because of contract matters. What exactly is the latest, though, on the Cowboys and the former Penn State star perhaps coming closer to agreeing to a contract?
That's a great question, Chris, and that's a multi-layered answer because Micah Parsons, he would like to be at everything for the Cowboys offseason program, but he watched CeeDee Lamb have to hold out for his second NFL contract this past year, and that's what it took for him to get paid, and it might take the same thing for Micah Parsons. Now, to be clear, Micah Parsons is not holding out. As you mentioned, he did show up to the first OTA practice on May 19th and had lunch with head coach Brian Schottenheimer that day. I've been at OTAs, like you said, every media access they've allowed. Tuesday, the second OTA last week, he was not there, but he's been watching film and keeping up with coaches. I was there yesterday. He was not present again. Head coach Brian Schottenheimer told me he actually ran into Micah Parsons in the airport last weekend. They were both going to different locations for quick vacation getaways, but he reiterated OTAs is voluntary. And to refresh people, Micah Parsons in the past has liked to train on his own before showing up for mandatory minicamp and training camp. And to me, we're probably not going to see any movement on the Micah Parsons contract situation probably until July, when it really pushes up against training camp, because Micah Parsons has repeatedly said, he told me just before the start of the NFL draft, that he has urgency to get this deal done and wants to get it done so that he doesn't have to hold out of training camp, because there's a new DC in town for the 3rd consecutive season. Matt Eberflus coming in for the departed Mike Zimmer, who replaced Dan Quinn when he left to go to Washington to be their new head coach. So Micah knows the importance of being there. Both Brian Schottenheimer and when I talked to defensive tackle Osa Odigizua yesterday, they talked about how Micah is a leader on this defense, and so it may take him continuing to apply a little bit of pressure on Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones to get this deal done before training camp. Now, he's been at every mandatory minicamp the last years. Then that will be really illuminating in a couple weeks if he's not there, but he's got an amicable relationship with Brian Schottenheimer, and we're still waiting here in Dallas.
Yeah, we'll just see, Matter, if it's going to come closer, right, to training camp, or if a deal gets done in the next few weeks or what so. Now, staying on topic with the defense, they had one of the worst groups last season, but what have been your early takeaways from their secondary group, specifically in OTAs?
That's a great question because the secondary is probably one of the positions that has the most question marks. You have All-Pro from 2023, Deron Bland. He's back. He's healthy. He's out there. He's in a contract year. He's been rotating at outside corner and nickel, which is what he started out as after he was a fifth-round pick in 2022, replacing an injured Jordan Lewis. And that's because Trayvon Diggs, he's out with a knee injury and is rehabbing that. And then you also have another guy working back from injury in Kalen Carson. He's healthy, but a young guy who struggled, only played 6 games last year. They traded for Buffalo Bills corner Jaire Elam, and he's someone who's really stood out to the coaching staff. He was a 2022 first-round pick from Buffalo. Dallas traded for him this offseason. And when I asked Coach Brian Schottenheimer about how do you feel comfort-wise with your secondary, he mentioned Elam as someone who's picked up the playbook really well and has tested in terms of the speed, the GPS tracking chips they have on the players, shoulder pads to see their heart rate and things like that. Elam's blown everyone away running 23.5, 23.6 miles an hour at times. And I asked Elam about this, and he said, yeah, I'm the fastest on the team. Now, that's a stretch considering All-Pro returner Kevontae Turpin is on this team, but Elam is feeling very comfortable, and he's had a couple nice pass breakups in both of the OTA practices that have been open to media thus far, but that's definitely going to be an area to watch going forward because with Diggs working his way back and then also third-round rookie Siobhan Revel, he's probably going to start on the PUP list in training camp, but they think he'll be back in the middle of training camp, the rookie out of East Carolina. There's opportunities for guys to really make a case for themselves at the corner position here.
Right. You know, if somebody goes down, you never want to see that. But in that moment, if you're a guy second on the depth chart or third, you have to seize that moment because you never know when you're going to get it back. Now, Dallas fans, Garrett, hope that George Pickens can help enhance their offense at wideout and be great alongside CeeDee Lamb. What have been your impressions of him and just the rest of the offense?
Obviously, when people think of George Pickens, right, they think of the guy who left the Pittsburgh Steelers and someone who Mike Tomlin told in a press conference to grow up after he got called for 2 personal foul penalties in a December win against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, he's been nothing but a veteran and a true adult since coming to Dallas. When talking to people down here, Brian Schottenheimer has noted he takes copious notes in the meeting rooms, asks a lot of questions, has been picking up the scheme incredibly quickly, and he's someone who could really make a difference for Dallas because of his downfield ability, his 16.7 yards per catch over the last 2 seasons among players with at least 110 catches in that span. That's the highest average in the NFL. And it's interesting, CeeDee Lamb's kind of taking him under his wing. CeeDee told me it's kind of similar to when I was a rookie on this team and 5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Mari Cooper was kind of showing me the ropes and giving him different parts of his secret sauce. And George Pickens has told me he's learned a lot from Lamb about intermediate passing routes, and you're already kind of seeing the results and how excited Lamb is to have a true number 2 next to him, because Brian Schottenheimer told me, this wasn't in the media viewing, but he said there was a pass play in the red zone where Lamb was kind of underneath and Pickens was running a post over the middle, and Lamb had his hand up thinking, oh yeah, the ball's going to come to me. But the ball's thrown, he looks up, and there's Pickens hauling it in, toe tapping in the back of the end zone for a touchdown, and Lamb lifted up his hands and screamed, yes, in excitement, just almost like a weight was lifted off his shoulders, because there's another massive target in the red zone who can take some pressure off of him, and that's something Lamb certainly welcomes. It's not all about the stats here in Dallas. Lamb loves this help that he's already seen from Pickens early on.
Right, because Lamb, he got his money. Now it's like, yo, it's time to win. And George Pickens, like you said, he takes that pressure off him. So very interesting to see what this Cowboys offense is going to look like when it comes to week 1 and on. Garrett Podell, we appreciate the time as always, man.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Anytime, and here are the odds to win the NFC East, according to FanDuel Sportsbook. The Eagles, reigning champs, favored at 140. Then